He thought she was just a waitress. He thought the coffee stains on her apron defined her worth. Sterling Cross, the ruthless CEO of Titan Hedge, tipped her $100 bill with a sneer and asked, "Hey, sweetheart, where should I put my next 10 million the lottery?" The entire table laughed. They shouldn't have. They didn't know that the woman pouring their sparkling water wasn't just serving tables, she was hiding from a past that terrified Wall Street. She looked at his chart, adjusted her glasses, and whispered 3 sentences that would cost him his reputation, his fortune, and his arrogance. Here is the story of how a billionaire picked a fight with the wrong nobody and lost everything. The air inside L'Obsidienne, Manhattan's most exclusive French bistro, smelled of truffles, aged cognac, and fear. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of Tuesday where the city's power brokers gathered to carve up companies over plates of escargot de Bourgogne. In the center booth, sitting like a king on a velvet throne, was Sterling Cross. At 34, Sterling was the youngest fund manager to ever grace the cover of Forbes 3 times in a row. He was handsome in a predatory way, sharp jawline, icy blue eyes that never blinked enough, and a tailored Brioni suit that cost more than most people's cars. He was currently holding court with his 3 junior associates, Brad, a nervous young man with a sweating problem, Preston, who agreed with everything Sterling said, and Chloe, a sharp-eyed analyst who looked like she was constantly plotting an escape route. "I'm telling you, the acquisition of Vector Tech is a done deal," Sterling boomed, his voice carrying intentionally across the quiet restaurant. He swirled a glass of Pinot Noir, ignoring the fact that he had just splashed a drop onto the pristine white tablecloth. "We short the stock at the opening bell tomorrow. By lunch, the CEO will be crying on CNBC and will be up 40%. It's not trading, boys. It's slaughter." Sarah Jenkins stood 10 feet away, clutching a silver tray against her chest. She was 32 but looked older. Her brown hair was pulled back in a severe, fraying bun, and her uniform was clean but ill-fitting, hanging loosely off her thin frame. She had dark circles under her eyes that no amount of drugstore concealer could hide. To Sterling Cross, she was part of the furniture. Less than furniture. Actually, she was a utility, a mechanism for delivering wine. "Excuse me." Sterling snapped his fingers without looking at her. "Refill, now." Sarah moved instantly. Years of working double shifts had taught her to be efficient and invisible. She stepped up to the table, the bottle of Domaine de la Romanée Conti cradled in a napkin. As she poured, her eyes inadvertently flickered down to the table. Spread out among the lobster shells were confidentials documents. A heavy bold header read, "Project Icarus Short Strategy, Arlington Biotech." Sarah's hand trembled, just a fraction of a millimeter. It was a micro-movement, imperceptible to most. But she knew Arlington Biotech. She knew the Phase 3 trial data was due Thursday. And she knew what the charts looked like because she checked them every night on her cracked smartphone before passing out. "Careful," Sterling barked. Sarah froze. She hadn't spilled a drop, but Sterling was in a mood to entertain his court. He looked up at her, really seeing her for the first time, and a cruel grin spread across his face. He saw the fatigue. He saw the cheap shoes. He saw a target. "You were looking at the papers," Sterling accused, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. He leaned back, spreading his arms. "Brad, Preston, look. The help is reading the confidential memos. Maybe she wants to make a trade." Preston snickered. "She probably thinks a short is something you wear to the beach." Sterling, Sarah finished pouring the wine. Her face burned, but her voice was steady, low, and raspy. "I apologize, sir. I was just ensuring the label was facing you. It's protocol." "Protocol," Sterling mocked, tasting the word like it was sour milk. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick money clip. He peeled off a crisp $100 bill and slapped it onto the wet tablecloth. "Tell you what, honey," Sterling said, his eyes gleaming with malice. "I'm feeling generous, and I'm bored. You see all these numbers. This is how the big boys play. But I'm sure you have opinions." He gestured to the empty chair next to him. "Sit." "Sir, I can't. The manager will. I own the building," Sterling interrupted. "If I say you sit, you sit. Or I fire your manager, then I fire you. Then I ensure you never work in this zip code again." The restaurant went silent. Other diners looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Sterling Cross was a man who could ruin careers with a phone call. Sarah hesitated. She looked at the maître d', who was cowering near the kitchen doors, giving her a frantic nod to comply. Slowly. Sarah sat. She kept her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She felt like a lamb invited to dinner by a pack of wolves. "Okay, let's have some fun," Sterling announced, grabbing a tablet from the table. He swiped through a few screens and shoved it in front of her face. "Since you were spying on my strategy, let's see what you've got. This is a chart for huge conglomerate, Kensington Steel. It's been flat for 6 months." He leaned in, smelling of expensive cologne and arrogance. "I'm going to give you a chance to change your life," he sneered. "I want you to give me financial advice. Tell me, based on this little squiggly line, is the stock going up or down tomorrow? If you guess right, I give you $10,000. Cash. Right now." Chloe, the female analyst, looked uncomfortable. "Sterling, come on, don't do this. Shut up. Chloe," Sterling snapped. He turned back to Sarah. "But if you get it wrong, or if you say something stupid like 'it looks pretty,' you have to get on your knees and bark like a dog, loudly, for the whole restaurant." The table erupted in laughter. Brad slapped the table. "Oh my God, Sterling, you're sick." "I'm a philanthropist," Sterling corrected, grinning. "I'm educating the working class." He looked at Sarah, his eyes dead and cold. "Well, what's it gonna be? Waitress 50-50 chance. Buy or sell." Sarah looked at the tablet, then she looked at Sterling. For a second, the tired waitress vanished. Her posture shifted. Her eyes, usually dull and submissive, sharpened into something focused and terrifyingly intelligent. She didn't look at the screen for a second. She stared at it for a long, uncomfortable minute. She wasn't just looking at the line, she was dissecting it. "I don't gamble. Mr. Cross," Sarah said softly. "It's not gambling if you know what you're doing," he countered. "But for you, yeah, it's a coin flip. Go on, bark for me." Sarah reached out. She didn't touch the screen. She pointed a calloused finger at the bottom of the chart. "I won't bark," she said, "and I don't want your $10,000. "Then what do you want?" "If I'm right," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the noise of the restaurant, "you apologize. To me, and to the busboy you screamed at last week. A written apology, signed and framed." Sterling threw his head back and laughed. "Done deal of the century. Now, tell me, O wise oracle of the tablecloths, what is Kensington Steel going to do?" The atmosphere at the table shifted. Sterling expected her to stammer, to pick a random direction, or to cry and run away. He wanted the power trip. He wanted to show his associates that everyone has a price, and everyone is beneath them. Sarah didn't stammer. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a cheap ballpoint pen, and hovered it over the tablet screen without touching the glass. "You're asking the wrong question," Sarah said. Her tone had changed. The submissive customer service voice was gone. In its place was a cadence that was clipped, rapid, and authoritative. "You're looking at the price action on the daily chart. It's flat, a consolidation pattern." Sterling raised an eyebrow. "She knows the word consolidation." "Adorable. Did you read that in Newsweek in the dentist's waiting room?" Sarah ignored him. "But look at the volume oscillator." She pointed to the jagged bars at the bottom of the screen. "For the last 6 weeks, the price has been stagnant, barely moving $1. Yet, the dark pool volume, the private exchanges where institutions trade to hide their moves, has increased by 400%. Sterling's smile faltered slightly. He snatched the tablet back, squinting at the volume bars. He hadn't pulled up the dark pool data. He was just looking at the standard NASDAQ feed. "How do you know the dark pool volume is up?" Sterling demanded. "That's not on this chart." "Because I watch the tape," Sarah said simply. "And because Kensington Steel isn't a steel company anymore." "Not really. They hold the patent for a specific lithium-ion coating used in the new Z-class drones being developed by Raytheon." Brad, the nervous associate, pulled out his phone under the table. Frantically typing, Sarah continued, her eyes locking onto Sterling's. "You're mocking me with a stagnant chart, thinking it's a boring industrial stock. But you missed the divergence. The RSI Relative Strength Index has been making higher lows while the price stays flat. That's hidden bullish divergence. Someone is accumulating. Someone big. Probably Vanguard or BlackRock. They are soaking up every share available before the patent news drops." The table was dead silent. The background clatter of forks and knives seemed to fade away. "You asked if you should buy or sell," Sarah said, standing up. "If you short this stock tomorrow like you plan to do with Arlington Biotech, you will be margin called by 10:30 a.m. Kensington is going to gap up. At least 20%. It's a coiled spring." She took a breath, smoothing her apron. "The pattern isn't consolidation. Mr. Cross. It's a Wyckoff accumulation schematic. Specifically, Phase C. The spring just happened yesterday. Tomorrow is the markup." Sterling stared at her. His mouth was slightly open. The words she used: Wyckoff accumulation, hidden bullish divergence, dark pool. These weren't terms you picked up watching the evening news. These were the tools of high-frequency traders and quantitative analysts. Brad looked up from his phone, his face pale. "Sterling," he whispered. "What?" Sterling snapped, not taking his eyes off Sarah. "I just checked the patent filings," Brad stammered. "She's right. Kensington renewed a classified patent with the Department of Defense 3 hours ago. It hasn't hit the major news wires yet, but it's on the SEC Edgar database." Sterling felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his back. He looked at the chart again. Suddenly, the boring flat line looked like a terrifying trap he had almost walked into. If he had bet against this, he would have lost millions. But his ego wouldn't let him concede. Not to a woman wearing a polyester uniform. Not in front of his team. "Lucky guess," Sterling scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual thunder. "You probably overheard a banker talking at table 4. "Perhaps," Sarah said. Or perhaps you're too busy looking at the mirror to look at the data. Sterling's face turned crimson. Watch it. You have your advice, Sarah said, stepping back. I don't want your money. I just want to do my job. Do you need any dessert menus, or are you finished? Sterling slammed his hand on the table. Who are you? You're not a waitress. Who sent you? Is it Garrison Capital? Did Julian send you to mess with my head? I'm just Sarah. Sir, I serve the bread. Liar. Sterling stood up, towering over her. Nobody knows Wyckoff patterns and serves bread. You're a plant. A spy. I was a quant, Sarah said quietly, the admission slipping out before she could stop it. A long time ago, before the crash of 08 broke the world. Now, I just want to clear these plates. She reached for his plate, but Sterling grabbed her wrist. It wasn't violent, but it was firm. Which firm? He demanded. Goldman Morgan Citadel. Sarah pulled her hand back, her eyes flashing with a sudden, intense anger that made Sterling recoil. I didn't work for a bank. Mr. Cross, she said, her voice dropping to a chill whisper. I wrote the algorithm that ate them. I worked for Helios Quantitative. I was the architect of the Red Queen Code. The color drained from Sterling's face completely. Even the junior associates gasped. Helios Quantitative was a myth, a ghost story on Wall Street. It was a boutique firm that existed for 3 years, made $40 billion, and then vanished overnight amidst rumors of a code that became too dangerous to use an algorithm that could predict market crashes by manipulating them. The architects of that code were never named publicly, wiped from the records to avoid federal prison. That's impossible, Sterling whispered. The Red Queen architect was a man. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows what they are told, Sarah said. She picked up the empty wine bottle. Kensington Steel, long at the open. Set your stop-loss tight, because the volatility will be high. That's a freebie. Next time. It costs you. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, her shoes squeaking softly on the floor. Sterling Cross stood frozen. He looked at the tablet, then at the retreating figure of the waitress. Brad, Sterling said, his voice shaking. Yeah, boss. Buy Kensington. Buy it all. Use the leverage. Everything we have in the discretionary fund. But she's a waitress. Do it, Sterling screamed, causing the entire restaurant to jump. And find out everything about Sarah Jenkins. I don't care what it costs. I want to know who she really is. As the kitchen door swung shut behind Sarah, she leaned against the stainless steel counter and exhaled, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She had blown her cover. She had let her pride get the better of her. She knew men like Sterling Cross. He wouldn't take the money and leave. He would come hunting. But Sarah had a secret weapon. She knew the market. Yes, but more importantly, she knew Sterling's portfolio better than he did. She had been watching him for months, waiting for the right moment. This wasn't an accident. This was the opening move of a game she had started planning 5 years ago. The waitress adjusted her apron, picked up a fresh tray of water glasses, and prepared to go back out. The lion thought he had found a mouse. He had no idea he had just stepped into a trap, set by a dragon. Wednesday morning broke over New York City with a heavy, grey sky, the kind that promised rain but never delivered, in a cramped basement studio apartment in Queens, 3 miles away from the gleaming spires of Manhattan. Sarah Jenkins sat on the edge of a mattress that had seen better days. The room was a testament to a life in hiding, The paint was peeling, and the radiator hissed like a dying snake. But in the corner, hidden behind a stack of drying laundry, was a setup that didn't belong. It was a ruggedized laptop, the kind used by field engineers in war zones, connected to a dedicated server block she had built herself from scavenged parts. Sarah wasn't wearing her waitress uniform. She was wearing an oversized hoodie, her hair loose and messy. She took a sip of lukewarm instant coffee and stared at the screen. The time was 9:28 a.m., 2 minutes to the opening bell. Her hands, usually steady when carrying trays of heavy crystal glasses, were shaking. She had broken her own rule. She had engaged. For 5 years, she had been a ghost. She had scrubbed toilets, waited tables, and walked dogs, burying the brilliance that had once made her the most feared mathematician in London. But Stirling Cross, that arrogant, preening vulture, had poked the wound. He had reminded her of the world she left behind, and the anger had boiled over. Stupid, she whispered to herself, watching the pre-market data stream on her screen. You gave him the key. On her monitor, the ticker for Kensington Steel KNS blinked. It was trading at $14.50. 5 miles west, on the 41st floor of the Titan Hedge Fund Tower, the mood was electric. The trading floor was a sea of blue light from hundreds of monitors. Usually, the room was a cacophony of shouting and ringing phones. Today, it was silent. Stirling Cross stood at the head of the room, his arms crossed, staring at the massive wall of screens. He looked impeccable in a charcoal suit, but his eyes were bloodshot. He hadn't slept. "Position check," Stirling barked, his voice tight. Brad, sweating through his shirt, tapped his keyboard. "We are fully leveraged. Stirling, we bought every available block of Kensington in the pre-market. We're holding 400,000 shares at an average of $14.80. We used the discretionary fund. If this goes down..." If she was lying. She wasn't lying, Stirling said, though he didn't sound convinced. He was trying to convince himself. He had bet his quarter's performance bonus and his reputation on the word of a woman who served him bread rolls. It was insanity. It was the kind of move that got fund managers fired and blacklisted. 1 minute to open, Chloe announced from her station. She looked pale. "Stirling, there's no news. The patent story hasn't hit Bloomberg yet. If the market opens and there's no volume, the algo traders will crush us just for the liquidity." "Hold," Stirling commanded. She said the spring happened. She said the accumulation was done. Ding, ding, ding. The opening bell rang through the speakers. The market roared to life. The numbers on the big board began to flash dizzyingly fast. "Kensington opening at $14.60, Brad called out. "Down 20 cents. Stirling clenched his jaw. "Selling pressure coming in," Chloe said, her voice rising in pitch. $14.50. $14.40. Stirling, the algos are hunting stops. We're down $50,000 in 10 seconds. I said hold. Stirling slammed his fist on the desk. "Sir, we're approaching the stop-loss limit," Brad yelled. $14.25. If it hits $14, 0 risk management auto-liquidates us. We'll lose everything. Stirling stared at the chart. A long red bar, a candle, was forming, driving the price down. It looked like a crash. He felt a wave of nausea. He had been played. The waitress. She was probably laughing at him right now. She had fed him a lie to destroy him. "Sell it," Brad shouted. "Get out now." "No," Stirling whispered. He remembered Sarah's eyes in the restaurant. They were cold, hard, and precise. The spring, she had said. Phase C. In the Wyckoff method, a spring is a final, terrifying drop designed to shake out the weak hands before the real move happens. It was a trap for the fearful. "Double down!" Sterling screamed. The room froze. "What?" "Buy more!" Sterling roared, his eyes wide with a manic intensity. "Buy into the drop. Absorb the selling. Do it now." Brad hesitated, terrified. "Sterling, that's suicide! I am the CEO of this firm. Execute the order or pack your desk." With shaking hands, the traders hammered their keys. They bought the dip. They poured millions more into the falling knife. The price hit $14.10, then $14.05. It hovered there for a heart-stopping 10 seconds. And then, it happened. On the screen, the volume bar spiked. A massive green tower appeared at the bottom of the chart. "Big print!" Chloe screamed. "Someone just bought 2 million shares in one block. It's Raytheon. It has to be Raytheon." The price ticked. $14.15. $14.50. $15. It moved so fast the numbers blurred. "Newswire," Brad shouted, reading from his terminal. "Pentagon announces exclusive defense contract with Kensington Steel for advanced drone coating technology. Contract valued at $4 billion. The room erupted. "Trading halt," Chloe yelled. "Circuit breaker triggered. The stock is halted up 20%. Sterling slumped against his desk, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He was drenched in sweat. He watched the frozen number on the screen, $17.80. When trading resumed 5 minutes later, the stock gapped up to $22. "We're up." Brad did the math, his voice trembling with awe. "Sterling, we're up $12 million. In 20 minutes?" The trading floor broke into cheers. High fives were exchanged. Phones started ringing off the hook. But Sterling didn't cheer. He didn't smile. He stared at the chart, tracing the line that had gone exactly where Sarah Jenkins said it would go. She knew. She knew the exact mechanics of the market. She didn't just guess the news. She understood the psychology of the institutional accumulation. She had seen the footprints of the giants in the mud when everyone else was looking at the sky. "Get me that investigator," Sterling said to Brad, his voice low and dangerous. "Now." "Sterling, we just made 12 million. Let's celebrate. Who cares about the Waitress?" Sterling turned to him, his eyes devoid of joy. "You don't get it, Brad. This wasn't a tip. This was a demonstration. She possesses a weapon, and I want to own it." The investigator was a man named Silas, a former Mossad intelligence officer who charged $5,000 an hour and specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. He sat in Sterling's glass-walled office later that afternoon, holding a thin manila folder. Sterling poured 2 glasses of scotch. He was still riding the adrenaline high of the morning trade, but it was curdling into paranoia. "Tell me," Sterling said, sliding a glass across the mahogany desk. Silas didn't touch the drink. He opened the folder. It wasn't easy. She's good. Better than good. Her digital footprint is almost non-existent. No Facebook, no Instagram, no credit cards. She pays cash for everything. Her rent is under a shell name. "Who is she?" Sterling demanded. "The woman waiting tables at L'Obsidienne is named Sarah Jenkins. But Sarah Jenkins died in a car accident in Ohio in 2015. Sterling froze. "She's using a dead woman's identity. Synthesized identity," Silas corrected. "Very high level. She bought the social security number on the dark web. built a credit history, and layered it perfectly. But I ran a facial recognition scan against international databases. It took a while, but I got a hit from an old Interpol Red Notice archive. Silas pulled out a grainy black-and-white photograph. It showed a younger woman, sharper, dressed in a severe business suit, walking out of a courthouse in London, surrounded by paparazzi. "Her name is Alexandra Thorne," Silas said. Sterling gasped. Thorne. The British math prodigy. The same. She was the head of quantitative strategy for the Meridian Group in London. In 2018, Meridian collapsed. £4 billion vanished. They blamed a rogue algorithm. The Red Queen code you mentioned, that was her magnum opus. It was designed to find liquidity crises before they happened and short the market. "I remember," Sterling said, pacing the room. "The press said she fled the country. They said she stole the source code." "She didn't steal it," Silas said darkly. "She destroyed it, or so she claimed. The British Serious Fraud Office wanted to put her away for life, for market manipulation. She walked out of bail and vanished into thin air. She's been on the run for 5 years." Sterling looked at the photo of Alexandra Thorne. The arrogance in her eyes was identical to the look the waitress had given him. "She's a fugitive," Sterling whispered. "A fugitive genius working for minimum wage. She's dangerous." "Mr. Cross," Silas warned. "People died when Meridian collapsed. Powerful people lost money. Russian oligarchs. Cartels. If they know she's in New York—" "They won't know," Sterling said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Because she belongs to me now." "What are you planning?" "I don't just want her advice," Sterling said. Picking up the photo, "I want the Red Queen. If she can predict a move like Kensington Steel, imagine what she can do with my capital. I'm going to make her an offer she can't refuse. And if she refuses, she's a wanted woman using a fake identity." Sterling shrugged. "She doesn't have the luxury of saying no." That evening, L'Obsidienne was busier than usual. The news of the Kensington Steel merger had rippled through the financial district, and everyone was in high spirits. Sarah was exhausted. The adrenaline from the morning had faded, leaving her drained. She knew she shouldn't have come into work. She should have packed her bag and run. But running cost money, and she was saving every penny for a passport that cost $20,000 on the black market. She needed 2 more weeks of tips. She was clearing a table near the back when she felt a presence. The air seemed to grow colder. She turned around. Sterling Cross was sitting at table 7, her section. He was alone this time. No entourage, no laughing associates. Just him, a bottle of sparkling water, and a manila folder resting on the white tablecloth. Sarah's heart stopped. She considered dropping the tray and bolting for the kitchen exit. But she knew the layout. The back door was locked from the outside after 9 p.m. She took a deep breath, summoned the mask of the waitress, and walked over. "Sparkling or still, sir?" she asked, her voice flat. Sterling looked up. His eyes were predatory, gleaming with the satisfaction of a hunter who has cornered his prey. "Hello, Alexandra," he said softly. The name hit her like a physical blow. The tray in her hand rattled. Sarah went rigid. She looked around quickly, but the restaurant was loud. No one had heard. "I don't know who that is," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "My name is Sarah." "Drop the act," Sterling said, tapping the folder. "I know about Meridian. I know about the Serious Fraud Office. I know you're a ghost. And I know you just made me $12 million. Sarah set the water down. She didn't pour it. She placed her hands on the table and leaned in, her face inches from his. The terrified waitress was gone. Alexandra Thorne had returned. "You are playing with fire, little boy," she hissed. "You have no idea who is looking for me. If you expose me, you don't just kill me, you bring a war to your doorstep." "I'm not going to expose you," Sterling said, leaning back comfortably. "I'm going to hire you." Sarah let out a short, bitter laugh. "I don't work for hedge funds. I bury them. Not anymore. You're broke. You're living in a hole in Queens. I saw the address report. It's pathetic. A mind like yours. Scrubbing dishes." Sterling shook his head. "I'm offering you a way out. Come work for Titan. Off the books. You run a shadow portfolio for me. We split the profits 80 to 20. I give you protection. I have lawyers who can keep the British government away for decades. I can buy you a new life. And if I say no, then I make a phone call," Sterling said, his voice hardening. "Not to the police, but to the Solntsevskaya Bratva, the Russian syndicate that lost $1 billion when Meridian crashed. I hear they're still very angry." Sarah stared at him. The cruelty of the man was breathtaking. He was blackmailing her into servitude. "You think you can control the Red Queen?" she asked quietly. "I think I own you," Sterling replied. "Monday morning, 8 a.m. My private office. Don't be late." He stood up, dropped a $1,000 tip on the table, and buttoned his jacket. "Buy yourself some decent clothes. You look like a tragedy." He walked away, feeling like a god. He had won. He had the ultimate weapon. Sarah watched him leave. She stood there for a long time, her hand resting on the manila folder he had left behind as a threat. Slowly, a strange expression crossed her face. It wasn't fear. It wasn't defeat. It was a smile. A cold, terrifying smile. She picked up the folder and whispered to the empty chair. "Checkmate in 4 moves. Sterling." He thought he had blackmailed her. He didn't realize that by bringing her into Titan Hedge, he was giving her exactly what she needed: access to a terminal with level 4 clearance. He wasn't her savior. He was her Trojan horse. Sarah pocketed the cash. She had a new job, and Sterling Cross was about to find out why you never, ever invite a predator into your home. Monday morning at Titan Hedge Fund was a religious experience for the greedy. The offices, located on the 40th floor of a Hudson Yard skyscraper, offered a panoramic view of the Hudson River, a glistening expanse of steel and grey water that made the people down on the street look like ants. Sarah Jenkins, or Alexandra Thorne, as the ghost in the machine was truly named, stepped out of the elevator at 7:55 a.m. She had followed Sterling's instructions. She wasn't wearing her waitress uniform, but she hadn't bought a designer suit either. She wore a simple, severe black turtleneck and grey slacks she had found at a thrift store. Her hair was still pulled back, her face devoid of makeup. She looked less like a financial wizard and more like an undertaker. The receptionist, a woman with a smile so bright it looked painful, didn't ask for her ID. "Mister, Cross is expecting you. The aquarium is ready." "The aquarium?" Sarah asked. "Follow me." They walked past rows of analysts who were already glued to their screens. The air hummed with the sound of cooling fans and hushed, frantic conversations. Sarah felt the familiar electric charge of a trading floor. It was a sensation she had tried to numb with cheap wine and exhaustion for 5 years. Now, it was back, prickling her skin. They reached the end of the hall, right next to Sterling's massive corner office. "Here we are," the receptionist said. Swiping a keycard, the aquarium was a small, soundproof glass box. It had no blinds. It was completely transparent. Inside, there was a single desk, an ergonomic chair, and a bank of 4 curved monitors. A high-end Bloomberg terminal sat in the center, its keyboard glowing with amber light. It wasn't an office. It was an exhibit. Sterling was inside, leaning against the desk, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as Sarah entered, his blue eyes cold and amused. "Welcome to your new home," Sterling said, spreading his arms. "I hope you like the view. I certainly will." He tapped the glass wall. "Soundproof, bulletproof, and from my desk." He pointed to his office 10 feet away. "I can see every keystroke you make. I had IT mirror your monitors to my private screen. You don't sneeze without me knowing about it." Sarah walked in, placing her worn canvas bag on the floor. She didn't look at the view. She looked at the computer. "Restricted access?" she asked, her voice calm. "Severely." Sterling smirked. "No email, no USB ports, no external internet access other than the Bloomberg data feed and the execution platform. You can't contact anyone. You can't transfer files. You can only do one thing: trade." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. The smell of his expensive cologne was suffocating. "Here is the deal. Alexandra, I've allocated $5 million to a shadow account. Code name, Project Zero. You trade it, you grow it. If you lose more than 5% in a day, I call my Russian friends. If you try to hack the firewall, I call the FBI, but—" He paused, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "If you make me 20% this month, I give you a passport, a real one, and a plane ticket to anywhere that doesn't have an extradition treaty." It was a lie. Sarah knew it was a lie. Men like Sterling never released their golden geese. They just built tighter cages. But she nodded slowly. "I need coffee," she said. "Black. 2 sugars." Sterling laughed. "You think you're in a position to make demands?" "The market opens in 14 minutes. Sterling, do you want me to make you money, or do you want me to sleepwalk through the opening bell?" Sterling stared at her for a moment, measuring her defiance. Then, he pressed the intercom button on the desk. "Chloe, get the new girl a coffee. Black. 2 sugars. Bring it to the fishbowl." He turned back to Sarah, his face hardening. "Impress me. Prove to me that the Red Queen wasn't just a myth." He left the glass box, locking the door behind him. Sarah heard the magnetic lock click shut. She was trapped. She sat in the chair. It was comfortable, far more comfortable than the wooden stools at the bistro. She reached out and touched the keyboard. The keys felt distinct, mechanical, responsive. For a moment, Sarah closed her eyes. She wasn't Sarah the waitress anymore. She wasn't the terrified fugitive. She was the architect. She began to type. She didn't need a mouse. Her fingers flew across the command line, pulling up charts, volatility indexes, and currency pairings faster than the screen could refresh. Sterling had locked the doors. He had firewall blocked her email. He had mirrored her screen. But he had made one fatal mistake. He had given her access to the execution platform. And in the world of high-frequency trading, the execution platform was connected to the clearing house, and the clearing house was connected to everything. Sarah pulled up a chart for vortex energy. Then she opened a second window, buried deep in the terminal's diagnostic tools, a window Sterling wouldn't recognize because it looked like raw code. "Hello." "Old friend," she whispered to the machine. She wasn't just looking for trades. She was looking for a back door into Titan Hedge's internal server. It would take time, weeks. Maybe. But Sterling had just given the greatest hacker in financial history a direct line to his vault, thinking he was safe because he took away her email. The door beeped. Chloe stood there, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She looked furious. She was a senior analyst, a graduate of Wharton, and she was bringing coffee to a waitress. Sarah took the cup without saying, "Thank you." She took a sip, her eyes never leaving the screen. "Short the yen," Sarah said, not looking at Chloe. "Against the Swiss franc." "What?" Chloe scoffed. "That's insane. The Bank of Japan is intervening today. If you short the yen, you'll get crushed." Sarah turned her head slowly, behind the glasses. Her eyes were ice. The Bank of Japan is bluffing. The intervention is priced in. The real move is the liquidity squeeze in Zurich. Short it, or don't. But tell Sterling he missed the first million. Chloe stormed out. Sarah watched her go, then turned back to the screen. The game had begun. By Wednesday, the fishbowl had become the center of gravity for the entire floor. Sarah had been trading for 48 hours straight, sleeping in 20-minute bursts in her chair. The $5 million Sterling had given her was no longer $5 million. It was $8 million. She hadn't just beaten the market. She had dissected it. She traded with a violence that frightened the junior associates. She didn't buy and hold. She scalped. She used complex options, strategies, iron condors, straddles, butterfly spreads, executing them with a speed that made the risk management software scream warnings that Sterling manually overrode. Sterling spent his days sitting at his desk, staring at the mirrored screen, mesmerized. It was like watching a grandmaster play chess against a toddler. She saw patterns where he saw chaos, but the tension in the office was shifting. The junior associates, Brad, Preston, and especially Chloe, were growing restless. They were being made obsolete by a woman who wore the same clothes 3 days in a row. "She's reckless," Chloe argued during the morning briefing. They were in the conference room. Sarah was still in her glass cage, visible through the open door, typing away. "Sterling, look at her exposure. She's leveraging 21 on agricultural futures. Soybeans, who trade soybeans like that? If the weather report in Brazil changes, we lose the entire principle. She's up 60% in 3 days. Chloe," Sterling said, spinning a pen in his fingers. "Results matter. You're up 2%. Do the math." "It's beginner's luck," Preston chimed in. "Or she's cheating. Maybe she's front-running news feeds." "She has no internet access," Sterling reminded them. "She's doing it on pure technicals. It's supernatural." Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the glass room. They all turned. Sarah had slammed her hand against the glass. She was standing up, pointing at her screen, then pointing at Sterling. She mouthed one word, "Now." Sterling jumped up and ran to the fishbowl. He swiped his card and threw the door open. What is it?" "Amnion Pharmaceuticals," Sarah said, her voice raspy from disuse. "AMN. It's crashing. Right now." Sterling looked at the big board. "It's trading at $45. It's stable." "Why would it crash? FDA ruling?" Sarah said rapidly. "It's not public yet, but look at the option chain. Someone is buying massive blocks of deep out-of-the-money puts. Someone knows. The drug failed the cardiac safety trial. It's going to zero." "That's a rumor," Chloe said, appearing behind Sterling. "Amnion is the darling of the biotech sector. Their heart medication is projected to make billions. Shorting it is suicide. Sarah ignored Chloe. She locked eyes with Sterling. The air between them crackled. "Sterling," she said, using his first name with a jarring familiarity. "You want the big kill, this is it. But you can't do it with my little shadow account. You need the main fund." Sterling hesitated. The main fund held $2 billion of client assets. "If I'm wrong," Sarah said, "you fire me. You turn me in. I go to prison for the rest of my life. I have no reason to lie to you. My freedom is tied to your profit." "This is crazy," Brad whispered. "Sterling, don't listen to her." Sterling looked at the chart. It looked perfectly healthy. A steady upward trend. To bet against it was to bet against the entire market sentiment. But then he looked at Sarah. He saw the same look she had that night at the bistro. The look of absolute, terrifying certainty. "Brad," Sterling said quietly. "Don't do it, boss. Short Amnion. $200 million. "Sterling," Chloe screamed. "You're betting 10% of the fund on a hunch from a waitress." "Do it!" Sterling roared, his veins bulging in his neck. "Market order. Sell it all, crush it." The room exploded into chaos. Brad and Preston ran to their terminals. They began hammering the sell orders. Selling 50,000 shares of AMN. Selling 100,000 shares of AMN. The sheer volume of their sell order caused the stock to tick down. $44.50. $44. "We're moving the market," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "If the news doesn't drop, the rebound will wipe us out. We'll be margin called in 10 minutes. The phone on Sterling's desk rang. It was the prime broker at Goldman Sachs. They were calling to ask if Titan had been hacked because the order size was so irrational. Sterling ignored the phone. He stood next to Sarah in the glass cage. They both watched the screen. 1 minute passed. The stock hovered at $43.80. 2 minutes. Sterling was sweating. He was losing $1 million every 30 seconds on the spread. "You better be right," Sterling hissed at her, "or I will kill you myself." Sarah didn't blink. "Wait for it." At 10:14 a.m., the news ticker at the bottom of the screen turned red. Breaking F. Dear Holt's trials of amnion heart drug, due to fatal cardiac arrests in Phase 3. Stock halted. The room went silent. "It's halted," Brad whispered. "Pending news." "What does that mean?" Sterling asked, his breath hitching. "It means," Sarah said, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms, "that when it reopens, it won't be $43. It will be $12. 20 minutes later, the stock reopened. It opened at $8.50. Amnion Pharmaceuticals had lost 80% of its value in a single second. Titan Hedge Fund, holding a massive short position, had just made $140 million in profit. The trading floor erupted. It was pandemonium. People were jumping on desks, hugging each other, screaming like banshees. It was the single greatest trade in the firm's history. Sterling stood frozen. He looked at the numbers. He was rich, filthy, obscenely rich. He had just secured his legacy as the king of Wall Street. He turned to Sarah. He wanted to hug her. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to build a statue of her. "You," Sterling stammered. "You are a goddess." Sarah didn't smile. She looked tired. "I'm not a goddess. Sterling, I'm a mathematician. Now, get out of my cage." "I have a headache." Sterling laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "Anything. You want aspirin? You want champagne? I'll buy you a pharmacy. I'll buy you a vineyard." He ran out to join his team, popping a bottle of Dom Perignon that had been saving for a special occasion inside the glass cage. Sarah watched them celebrate. She watched Sterling high-five Brad. She watched Chloe look at her with a mixture of hatred and fear. Slowly, Sarah turned back to her terminal. While the office was distracted by the euphoria of the win, Sarah opened the command line interface again. During the chaos of the trade, while the system was flooded with data and the risk parameters were temporarily disabled to allow the massive short order, Sarah had executed a second command, a silent one. She had injected a packet of data into the firm's central server, a sniffer program. It was searching, not for stock tips, but for a name. Meridian Group. And in the bottom right corner of her screen, a tiny line of text blinked green. Match found. File Meridian liquidation. Protocol. Encrypted location. DAO. Cross-private drive. Sarah's heart stopped. Sterling Cross hadn't just made money when her old firm collapsed. He had the liquidation protocol. That meant he was one of the people who had helped destroy her life. He wasn't just an arrogant boss. He was one of the architects of her fall. She watched Sterling through the glass, laughing, drinking champagne, celebrating the money she had just made him. The waitress adjusted her glasses. "Enjoy the champagne, Sterling," she whispered. "It's the last victory you'll ever have." She had the key. Now, she just needed to turn it. Friday arrived with the force of a hurricane. Sterling Cross was buzzing. The Amnion trade had put Titan Hedge on the global map, and investors were pouring in capital. He was untouchable. At 9:00 a.m., Sterling stood before the glass cage. Sarah was typing furiously. "Today is the day," Sterling announced, his voice trembling with greed. "Activate the Red Queen. Full scale. I want to corner the Eurobond market. We have the liquidity. Deploy the algorithm." Sarah stopped typing. She looked up, her expression unreadable behind the glass. "Are you sure, Sterling? Once I turn it on, it cannot be stopped. It eats everything. Do it," Sterling roared. "I own you. Make me a billionaire." Sarah nodded slowly. She hit enter. On the main floor, the giant screens flickered. A single line of code appeared, cascading down like a waterfall of green data. The trading bots sprang to life. For 10 minutes, the numbers were beautiful. Titan's portfolio swelled by millions every second. Sterling popped another bottle of champagne, cheering with his team. Then, the screens turned red. "Sir," Brad screamed, his voice cracking. "The algorithm. It reversed. It's shorting our own positions." "What?" Sterling spun around. "Impossible override it. I can't!" Chloe yelled, slamming her keyboard. "It locked us out. It's liquidating the entire fund. It's selling everything at market price. We're losing 50 million a second." Sterling ran to the glass cage. "Alexandra, stop it. Turn it off." But the woman inside didn't move. She just sat there, staring at the screen. Sterling pounded on the glass. "I said stop it." Suddenly, the lights in the cage went out. The figure in the chair slumped over. Sterling grabbed the emergency keycard and tore the door open. He rushed in and spun the chair around. It wasn't Sarah. It was a mannequin from a department store, dressed in her black turtleneck and grey slacks, wearing a wig. "Where is she?" Sterling whispered, horror dawning on him. On the desk, the Bloomberg terminal was flashing a single message: "Subject Meridian liquidation. Protocol status decrypted and uploaded to SEC/FBI sender." The Red Queen Sterling froze. The file he had stolen years ago, The proof that he had engineered the collapse of her old firm to steal millions was gone. She hadn't just drained his accounts, she had sent the evidence of his crimes to every regulatory body on the planet. "Sir," Brad said quietly, pointing to the window. Down on the street, flashing blue and red lights surrounded the building. FBI agents were pouring into the lobby. Sterling fell to his knees. His phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. "You wanted financial advice. Here it is, invest in a good lawyer. You're going to need one." He looked at the empty desk. Lying next to the keyboard was her old Waitress apron, neatly folded, with a single $100 bill on top, the same bill he had tipped her to mock her. On the bill, written in Sharpie, were 3 words: "Keep the change." Sterling Cross, the king of the jungle, didn't scream. He just stared at the money as the elevator doors dinged open and the agents shouted for him to put his hands in the air. The waitress hadn't just beaten him. She had erased him. Somewhere in the crowded streets of New York, a woman with short-cropped blonde hair and a new passport stepped onto a train bound for the airport. She checked her phone one last time, saw the news alert about the raid on Titan Hedge, and smiled. Alexandra Thorne was dead. Sarah Jenkins was gone. The Red Queen was finally free. Sterling Cross thought his money made him invincible. He thought he could buy genius and enslave it. But he forgot the most important rule of the market. Bulls make money. Bears make money. But pigs get slaughtered. He treated a brilliant woman like a servant. And in the end, she served him exactly what he deserved: justice. Sterling is currently serving 20 years for fraud and embezzlement. As for the waitress, no one knows where she is. But if you're ever in a small cafe in Paris or Tokyo, and the coffee is served by a woman who looks a little too smart to be pouring drinks, maybe tip her well, and whatever you do, don't ask her for stock tips. Wow, what a twist. If you enjoyed this story of revenge and redemption, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Do you think Sterling deserved his fate, or did the waitress go too far? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.